Hello and welcome to our latest Meet the Adopter webcast. Our guests tonight are Shelley and Andy, who adopted their daughter 2 years ago by a scheme called Concurrent Planning. We're also joined by Alice, a social worker who is head of adoption for Quorum London. And Quorum, of course, is one of the agencies at the forefront of concurrent planning. As ever, we'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to join the conversation this evening, you can tweet at First for Adoption using the hashtag MeetTheAdopter, or you can email socialmedia@firstforadoption.org.uk. Alice, can we start with you?
Sure.
What is concurrent planning, and how does it differ from fostering and adoption?
Okay, well, concurrent planning is a really wonderful scheme where children who are subject to care proceedings or legal proceedings get to join a family who may become their permanent family right at the earliest stage in their life. So often as newborn babies or straight from hospital. They join families who are approved as both prospective adopters and as foster carers. And when the baby moves into the family to begin with, they're placed as a foster child while the legal proceedings continue.
And how common is it, concurrent planning?
It's not very common, but it's getting more common. The government, for very good reason, thinks that placing children as early as possible in a family that could be, as a good chance, will be permanent, is really good for children's long-term well-being and mental health, and they have encouraged local authorities and voluntary adoption agencies to really focus on concurrent planning. So it's still quite a small number relative to the number of children who are placed for adoption, but it's something we'd like to grow.
So if we're looking, to be any kind of parent, as we know, is a lifelong job and journey and learning process with many challenges along the way. What kind of qualities would you be looking for as a social worker for somebody who's going to parent or care via concurrent planning?
Well, that's a really good question, because I think it does require some really, I hesitate to say exceptional, because lots of people have these qualities. You have to be resilient because you're taking a child, you're looking after that child, with 100% of your kind of capacity and ability, but you are knowing that that child may return to a member of the birth family. So that obviously does take a very special kind of person, but there are lots of special people. It takes people who can really put the needs of children right at the top of their list, and in some ways put themselves very much as in second place and think this is the best start I can give to this baby, and that will kind of carry me through, if you like. And
thank you. Well,
get some nodding there.
As you're pointing,
yeah.
As we know, we have two of those special kinds of people here, Shelley and Andy, who began their concurrent planning about 2.5 years ago now, isn't it? And your daughter came to live with you as your daughter 2 years ago, or perhaps
just over 2 years ago. Yeah. Well, she came to us as a foster placement first of all, just over 2 years ago. Yeah.
And well, let's start at the beginning. I'll start with a really personal question. Had you tried other ways of making a family before you ended up with concurrent planning?
Yeah, we had, of course. We'd spent a few years trying to have a baby and went through 3 failed attempts of IVF. And I think then after the 3rd attempt, we kind of made our peace with the fact that we were never going to have a baby, and kind of just decided to get on with our lives. And then we went to a fertility show one day, and there was somebody there from Bath doing a talk on adoption. So we sat and listened for a while, and then took a few leaflets home. And then after that, I made a phone call to Bath, who gave me a few numbers to call, and one of them was Quorum. And I called Quorum and had a brief conversation with somebody on the phone who was a really nice person, and that person explained to me a little bit about concurrent planning. So,
and you thought that felt right for you both?
Yeah, well, I mean, initially we had no idea what it was at all, and we hadn't really been thinking seriously about adoption for very long at that point either. But as soon as we started to look into concurrency more deeply, we started to realise that it was something that we felt very drawn to as a route for us to a family. But also I think very, very importantly to us, as Alice was saying, that it's a really, really good outcome for a child at an absolutely critical point very, very early on in their lives, which you as parents can really help to make that a good experience for them, whether or not the child comes to you as an adopted child or goes back. So for both sides, it just looked like it was going to work for us, didn't it? Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, because that is a special. That's an extraordinary kind of marriage of head and heart, I imagine, to be able to put the child first, which of course we all like to think that we do, however our family is, we find our family or put our family together, but to have that potential of that child perhaps going back, but remembering that if it were to return to its birth family, it's because that was the best possible place for it to be. So you made that decision, and what was the process like? How long did it take?
I made a phone call to Quorum to ask about the information evening. We came along to the information evening in May. At that point, we then, after that, did the registration, some training throughout the summer, then the home assessment process. And then our daughter was actually placed with us the following April. So it was actually less than a year from the very first information evening to having our daughter placed with us. So I think that was really quick, to be honest.
Is that, Alice, from your professional perspective, is that quick? Yeah.
That is quick. I mean, I think you never know how long you're going to wait for a placement. I mean, everybody has to go through that assessment process and preparation process, and that's a fairly sort of standard length of time. We've got timescales and all the rest of it. The bit that is less predictable, whether it's adoption or whether it's concurrent planning, is always that kind of wait from being approved to the right child and the right situation becoming available. So, it's great if you don't have to wait too long, but it does vary quite a lot.
And was there an immediate sense of, it's easy to be a bit dewy-eyed and poetic about these things because families may won't feel like this, but was there a special feeling about the little girl that you found out about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were just really excited and really looking forward to meeting her. And it was actually, I think, about 10 days after we'd been called by our social worker. He told us about the placement, and then we had an interview with our social worker and the social worker, our baby's social worker, and then we were chosen from there. And then we went to meet her, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because they're approved foster carers already, so it's a much more quick process than it would be if you were looking at the beginning of an adoption placement.
Sure. And what kind of training did you talked earlier, Alice, about how it takes a special kind of person, but presumably even those special people need some help. And
absolutely, and we need to be really sure that people have properly taken in what they're committing themselves to, because obviously it's great to look after a tiny baby, which is what many of the concurrent placements are, but you've got to look after that baby, as you're saying, really knowing that the future's not certain. You've got to devote yourself to this baby like you would, babies are programmed to be, kind of get that devotion out of people, aren't they? So you're going to be in that position whether you like it or not, devoted to this child, and you have to kind of still hold on to a bit of you that knows that the outcome is uncertain.
From our perspective, the training was really, really key, and I'm sure it's the same with all agencies. With Quorum, for us, the training was fantastic. We came to extended all-day training sessions because you really do need to know those things. You need to know what kind of backgrounds the children that you're going to be looking at placing with come from. You need to understand what challenges those babies might have. You need to understand the legal process. So all of these aspects to taking on a concurrent placement, you really need to understand it. And exactly as Alice says, you need to know that, because it's a challenging job, not least because, you know, as a mainstream adopter, you have potentially quite a lot of information about the child, their background, certainly their health history. Whereas as a concurrent carer, you have very, very little, and because the child is coming to you so young, typically, you need to be prepared for all eventualities and all outcomes. So the training is really, really important from that respect, to enable you to walk confidently into that first meeting, when you first do meet your hopefully your child, but certainly the child that you're going to be looking after for the next 6 months or so. Walk in there confident that you understand and know to the best that you can what to expect and how to deal with what that situation is going to throw at you, which could be any number of different things.
Sure, and I think, I don't know about you, but I think it's important that your friends and family understand that as well, because obviously they need to know that that baby is coming into their wider family, but that baby may not be staying, and that's really important too.
So presumably you had to do your own version of training your friends and family about what you were undertaking. I mean, one relies in adoption on that network of people. Presumably you valued your friends and family to help you along the way. Was it a difficult process to explain to them what amounts to almost a risk that you were taking, really?
Yeah, they actually came to some training as well.
Did they?
So they supplied training for the family here, so that was really good for them. So, I mean, we had my parents, your mum, your brother, sister-in-law. So, it was really good. It was really good for them. And
and that was good because from our perspective, that helped to take a little bit of the pressure off of us to have those conversations, because obviously our parents in particular were just desperate to be to come and do the sort of the grandparent thing, which is wonderful obviously, but at the same time there needs to be that almost professionalism, I suppose might be the word, and it was really, really useful for us, for Quorum to be the bad guy, if you like, in that sense of having to explain that, okay, there are some boundaries and some rules here that need to be understood and to be obeyed. And having had that training, again, our families were great and obviously there for everything we needed them for.
So it sounds like it was really helpful in dealing with the uncertainties, reminding yourself that actually I'm parenting, but I'm also doing a job.
Yeah.
And I know that for you, Shelley, your experience prior to being a carer and then a mom was you were a nanny, weren't you?
I worked as a nanny.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, because I had worked with children of lots of different ages, so I had a lot of experience. I knew how much energy I was going to need, which was one thing. But yeah, just in terms, I think when we were doing the training, I thought quite a lot about, okay, so if the baby did return to the birth family, I'd be able to cope with that quite well, because I have experience of saying goodbye to the children at the end of the day when I've been working with them, and I can do that quite easily. It's never an issue. Of course, when the baby came to the house, it was completely different, and we fell in love with her immediately. So it would have been very hard had she have had to go back. But if that was the case, we still would have felt as if we'd done the best thing for her at that stage in her life,
Absolutely.
Totally, and the support from Quorum has always been there with that eventuality in mind. We knew that going forward, whatever the outcome was, that we'd be able to rely on our social workers and the wider team here to support us through that, which has been really important.
Yeah,
Can't overstate that enough.
That's true.
So she came to your home. You were the love was already there for you, and she obviously needed you. She was a baby. And how and when did you find out that it was going to be possible for her to stay with you? That it was decided by the courts and all the professionals involved that she wasn't going to go back to her birth family. She was going to stay with you.
I think we got the placement order in the July, so about three months or so. And then we went to the adoption panel in August, didn't we?
Yeah.
So it happened quite quickly.
And that is quite quick sometimes.
Yeah.
A bit longer. Yeah.
And how much contact did you have with your daughter's birth family?
Unusually for concurrent placement, we had none. Our daughter came to us from an emergency foster placement of 3 months. So the birth family had some contact, but by the time she came to us, they had relinquished, which, you know, on the one hand was you know, a positive, because it meant that we didn't have to go through a lot of what we've been trained to go through, which is bringing the child to contact, supervised contact with the birth family. But the downside is that when our daughter gets to the age where she's ready to hear that kind of depth of detail about her birth family, we won't have had that personal interaction with them, and therefore won't be able to bring a personal touch to the way that we explain it to her. So it kind of had its ups and downs, really. But we're unusual in that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, most families, it's part of the deal, if you like. If you're a concurrent carer, you understand that while the child is a foster child with you, you will be involved in bringing the child to contact. At Coram, we have really lovely contact supervisors who support everybody. So they support the child first and foremost, but they support the birth, whoever from the birth family is coming, and obviously they kind of look after the carers as well. For some children, that can be 3 times a week for 3 hours, so that's a big commitment for the carers to bring a child up, you know, into London in our case, and it's hard. You know, you have to give up your child for that period of time and go away and leave that child with the contact supervisor and their birth parent or parents. So that's a hard thing to do, but it is well supervised, and everybody is as well supported as they possibly can be through that process.
And it's clearly one of the very positive things about concurrency for both, as Andy was hinting, for obviously most importantly for the child, but also where it's appropriate and possible for what become the adoptive parents to know and to have met the birth family. Then when you get to life story work, which I think was probably what you were hinting at, wasn't it? You have a lot more information that you can share with your child.
And it feels like a very transparent process for everybody, I think. You're all kind of in the know. You all, the birth parents can see what's happening. They can see how well their child is being looked after by, not by them, but by someone else, which is reassuring and helpful. There are not many fantasies on either side about, who the birth parents are, who the carers are. So I think that's really helpful.
Thank you. We've had a couple of emails actually that have come in. One from somebody who's considering concurrent planning, and they want to know how successful are these kind of placements? Is it possible? I'm sorry to spring this on you, Alice, but do you know, for instance, what percentage of children go on to be adopted?
I don't quote me, but it's actually most of the children do go on to be adopted, because although placing a child in this way is the best thing for a child, we do have to take into account the needs of the adults as well. So if it looked from the start like there was a really good chance that a child would be able to go back to their birth family, that's probably not a good child to put in a concurrent placement, because that child's, the odds are that child will have to move, and the whole kind of point of concurrent planning is you are giving the child the best option on the information available to you, that they won't have to move. So it's always balanced that way, if you like. And the numbers of children that go back, it's as little as 1 in 10, something like that, because we are, it's usually not the first child that a birth mother's had. It's usually part of a pattern of maybe somebody having a number of children who have been removed before. There are a lot of kind of research and investigations done by the local authority before they would consider a concurrent placement for a child, where they've already checked out all the kind of extended family in the birth family. And that's really important, that all that happens as part of the, quickly and in a timely way, but before a child is placed in a concurrent placement. I think the other interesting thing is that of the children who are placed through concurrent planning and go on to be adopted, it's an incredibly stable history of those placements. So at Coram, in all the placements that we've made in the years that we've been doing concurrency, we've never had a placement breakdown in one of those placements. And I think that's because obviously if you do have your child from as young as possible, you've got a really great chance of making an incredibly strong bond and attachment on both sides.
Well, I'm cheating with this question because Shelley and Andy showed me some pictures of their daughter, so I know she's doing well because in the pictures I saw, she had a big smile on her face and was clearly enjoying life. She's doing well, I take it. It's my loaded question.
She's doing very well, and that smile she's had since the first day we met her. So, you know, she's a very smiley child, very happy child, chatting away and singing songs now, isn't she? Although she doesn't know all the words, so she's like, try to sing songs and just, she's hilarious, she's funny, she's amazing, you know, she's great.
So now I ask you the horrible bit. What's been the most challenging part of having her? Or hasn't it? Has it been plain sailing all the way?
Yeah,
I mean, been difficult at all.
In terms of our daughter, fine. You know, the same problems that every parent of a baby to a 2.5-year-old as she's now has. You know, she has tantrums occasionally, but I think in terms of the whole process, the sort of the challenging moments were leading up to placement, to getting the adoption order. I think was probably the most challenging, because at that point you're very, very emotionally attached. You're very bonded, and it's like you kind of know that that's what's going to happen, but you never know when you know a member of extended family on the birth side is going to come forward, and those uncertainties that you've been trained to cope with and deal with, all of a sudden they're now little thorns in what has become a very, very deeply emotive and bonded situation. And it's, you know, the closer you get, the more, you know, nervous and stressful it becomes about, you know, what if, because ultimately it's the court that decide. So that was quite difficult, I think.
Yeah, because the first time it went to court for the placement order, we didn't get it, did we? So that was, you know, quite disappointing and quite worrying. But it was only a case of waiting like 3 weeks or so, and they went back to court, and then we got the placement order. So
I mean, I think it's quite challenging. The other thing that you quite early on knew that you weren't coping with, there was a child who had a lot of difficulty, and of course, because concurrent children are placed as tiny babies, there is more uncertainty about their development, and the nature. You know, I was saying that it's not right for every child, but it's right when we think a child is. The odds are probably not in favour of the child going back to the birth family, and alongside that goes the kind of developmental uncertainty that goes with babies who come from, you know, quite complicated backgrounds on the whole, where they may have, you know, parents who've used drugs or alcohol during pregnancy, and that is one of the things that people who do concurrent care have to kind of be more aware of, because they're new babies and you don't know what's going to turn out over time.
There are uncertainties with development, but I think, you know, that's the same for anybody that has a birth child. You know, you pray it be healthy. It may have, you know, developmental issues, and so it's, you know, you never really know, do you? So you just
Absolutely
have to be,
not. You've talked a lot about feeling supported and the training being really helpful, as, you know, perhaps some of it didn't make sense until you were actually living it, and then you thought, oh, now I realise why. Is there any... My question was originally, not knowing what your experience had been, was there anything missing? I suspect it sounds like no, you felt really well equipped. But for other people watching who may be earlier on in the process or maybe considering it, was there particular bits of the training that now, with hindsight, you found most valuable, or you would have liked more of? Or indeed, was there anything missing that you feel would have helped?
Nothing really missing. I mean, everything was really covered. The only thing I sometimes found tricky was people would ask me questions about my daughter, and sometimes I feel like, how do I answer tricky questions? You know, someone might say, "Oh, where does her hair? You know, where does the colour come from?" You know, like, and I have to think quickly. You know, how to answer a question. So just. Being prepared to answer tricky questions sometimes was something that would have been good maybe if it had been covered.
And I think a lot of, you know, not so much foster carers, but certainly when you go on to be adoptive parents, you know, you people do ask the most amazing questions that you would think, well, why would you even ask that?
People feel like they have permission, don't they, to just go.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I think there were sort of two things. One was the eye opener, that is having the first training session, which really goes in depth into the possible histories It's heartrending, absolutely heartrending when you hear the situations that some of these children have come from. And that's what makes that, what other people would see as the difficult part of how do you take a child into your life that you might relinquish at some point. Well, if I can be 6 months keeping that child out of that environment, then that's an important thing to do. The only other thing really that I think it probably came at the right time, looking back on it, was the life story book, because how and when you start to approach your life story work or that conversation with a child when you've had that child since from a baby, it's like at what point do you kind of start that, but when we finally had the training on that, which was very recently,
so,
the penny kind of dropped. It was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, so we can start doing that. So I think just from a peace of mind point of view, it would have been nice to have it earlier, but in terms of its practical implementation, not necessarily until about now.
Thank you. So another rude question, would you like more children?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, actually, she told me today she wants a sister.
Excellent. I didn't know that. So
no, I know you didn't.
Thanks for telling me that on live television.
I said, "Are you sure you don't want a brother?" And she said, "No, sister."
Yeah. No, we had to wait until she reached a certain age. Obviously, we then have to go through another process of assessment, because obviously our circumstances are different. When we were assessed the first time, we had no child. Now we have a child. So again, it's starting a whole process for us. So we're very, very, very enthused and definitely going to be doing it. So
That's nice to hear.
We'd love to.
A question for you, Alice, on which fits in nicely here actually. Judith says, I'm a mother with 2 birth children, aged 9 and 7. Could I become a concurrent carer even though I already have children?
I mean, there's no reason why not. The same kind of, you'd need the same kind of flexibility that somebody who had or hadn't got children. So, we've talked a bit about the contact. I mean, actually, if you've got school-age children, that may fit, really well, that you can, other children can be at school and you're bringing the baby to contact. We do have carers who have children. I think, there are lots of children who live in families where they foster. So, there's a sort of model for talking to a child about what you're doing, because that you need to explain to your existing children that this child is coming to live with you and that you are going to be looking after this little baby and doing everything you can for this little baby, but it might be that we're just looking after this baby for a while things improve in their birth family. But I think children are very resilient about those things actually, and if their parents are kind of open with them and help them understand those things, and there's books and all that kind of stuff, then children can manage those things quite easily. And if you go through concurrent planning again, you've got a little girl who's very secure and very settled, and you'll be able to talk to her about what the process is, and I'm sure she will manage that really well.
Thank you. So, in answer to Judith's question, in principle, no. Obviously, it depends on the circumstances within your family, but in principle, no reason at all. So that's good to hear. We're almost running out of time, would you believe? Is there anything, you've said a lot already, which will give people food for thought, and I suspect will have interested a few people who are uncertain, having heard what a lovely experience it sounds like you've had. But any advice or anything you'd like to say to people who might be considering doing what you did?
I would just like to say, don't let age put you off to older women.
Yes, because you were ancient, weren't you?
No, but I went through the whole process thinking, am I too old? I was 44 when our daughter was placed with us, so and I was told consistently no, it wouldn't be an issue, as long as you're healthy and you've got the energy and you know what you're getting yourself into, then age wasn't an issue. So I just to say to other people that are older, if they're thinking about it, that don't not do it just because of your age.
Absolutely, I'd reinforce that in all kinds of placement, and in traditional, if I may use the word, adoption. There is no upper age limit. If you want it, if you're well, if you understand the challenges, then go for it by all means. Would you like to add to that, Andy?
Yeah, not the age thing, obviously, because but I think there's certainly two things I would say. The first thing is if concurrency is something that you're kind of interested in, read up on it, get as much information as you can, really educate yourself about the process, what is involved. And having done that, if you still think it's for you, then just go for it, because it's an amazing experience. The other thing I would say is ring round different agencies. Because it's very, very important. I'm sure what's come out of our conversation is how important our relationship with our agency is for our education, training, support, everything. It's 18 years worth. Make sure that you've spoken to 3 or 4 agencies and really choose the one that feels like the best fit for you. Because if you don't have a really good relationship with your agency, then the process I would imagine would be very different to what we've experienced. So.
Really wise words, and of course, I'm duty bound to say that, of course, First for Adoption is here as the front door to all those agencies. We can give you as much information as we have, which is an awful lot of information about how to contact those agencies and where they are and what they do. Alice, do you want to add anything while we're imparting pearls of wisdom?
No, only to say that, I think you've given a really good description. I mean, I think you can hear from these two that you do have to have, you have that level of kind of dedication and that capacity to put a child's need first, which is the real kind of nub and most important thing about concurrent planning, as it is in adoption in general, but I think it's really kind of writ large in concurrency. And you've done a fantastic job. That's what I want to say to them.
It certainly sounds like it. That's about it for now. Sorry we haven't had time to answer all your questions this evening. There is more information about concurrent planning and fostering to adopt on our website at First for Adoption, firstforadoption.org.uk. And you can call our information line during office hours between 10 and 6, and the number's 0300 222 0022. But for now, thank you, Shelley, Andy, and Alice.